Hello everyone. In this video, we will discuss about the biography of William Shakespeare and some important works of William Shakespeare. So let's start with his brief introduction. William Shakespeare was an important writer of Elizabethan age, and he wrote so many novels, poems, etc. He was born on 1564 and died on 1666. He is also known as Bard of Avon or simply Bard. Bard means poet, and Avon is a palace or a river. The second is he was baptized on 26 April 1564. His birthplace was Stanford upon Avon. Stanford is the place and Avon is the river which was situated near his house. Stanford was in Warwickshire, which was in England. The era in which William Shakespeare was born was the era of Elizabethan and Jacobean. The movement was English Renaissance. His father name was John Shakespeare and his mother name was Mary Eden Shakespeare. His wife name was Annie Hathaway of Shottery. Shottery is the palace where his wife was born. He has three children, Susan, Hamnet and Judith. He got his education from local grammar school and the King's New School. He was also a leading master of the Lord Chamberlain Man. Lord Chamberlain Man was a theatre which name was later converted into King's Man, and an acting company which was an acting company in London, Lord Chamberlain Man. After the crowning of King James I in 1603, the company changed its name to the King's Man. Shakespeare with his company also built the Globe Theatre in 1599. A very famous point, the Globe Theatre was built by Shakespeare in 1599, but at the performance of the play Henry VIII was a play of William Shakespeare. While the performance of this play, the Globe Theatre was burned down and it was rebuilt and opened in 1614, and he was burned down in 1613. He was an active writer since 1613, and after 1613 to 1666 he didn't wrote so many works, so his active writing period till 1613. Shakespeare last year was 1585 to 1592, this span of 7 years. During that time he didn't wrote many works. At the last stage of his career, he collaborated with John Fletcher, who was also a novelist or who wrote novels and poems, etc. He wrote 37 plays, 154 sonnets, and two long narrative poems. So, there are four folio of William Shakespeare, which was very important, and this folio tell us about the important work of Shakespeare. This folio was prepared by the friends of William Shakespeare. Like first folio, which was published in 1623, John Hemmings and Henry Condell. Both of them are fellow actors and friend of William Shakespeare, compiled the work of William Shakespeare, which was known as the first folio. It was published by trio of stationers named William Haggard, his son Isaac Jaggard, and Edward Blount. It was published by three stationers. This first folio was dedicated to William Hulbert, who was Earl of Pembroke, and Philip Hulbert, who was Earl of Monte, Montgomery. 26 drama was published in it, while Persiles omitted. In first folio, 36 drama was published, and only Persiles was omitted, which was later submitted into this next second folio. Ben Jonson wrote the preface to this folio. Who wrote the preface of first folio? Ben Jonson wrote the preface of first folio, and he also used a phrase about William Shakespeare. The phrase was not of an age but for all time. It is an important phrase which was asked, which had been asked in so many exams, in UGC exam, in PGT exams, that not of an age but for all time is a phrase. Who said this phrase and to whom? So Ben Jonson said this phrase to William Shakespeare in first folio. Now the second folio. Second folio was published in 1632. It contained an epitaph of the admirable dramatic poet William Shakespeare by Milton. In this second folio, um, Milton wrote an epitaph in this second folio. It contained Persila's play, which was omitted in the first folio. This second folio was published by Eliot, William Asole, Richard Hawkins, Richard Mangham, and John Smethwick. It was printed by John Scotts. Now, the third folio. Third folio, which was published in 1663, it was published by Philip Chatwinde. So there is not so much information about the third folio. Just learn the its published date and who published it. The fourth folio was published in 1685, which was published by R. Rantley, E. Brewster, R. Chasfield, and H. Herringman. And he wrote two important narrative poems, Venus and Adonis in 1593 and The Rape of Lucily in 1594. And William Shakespeare's other poem except sonnets. And he wrote other very important poems like Passionate Pilgrim in 1598, Phoenix and the Turtle in 1601, Lover's Complaint in 1609, sonnets. And he also wrote some sonnets like sonnets which was and he wrote sonnets which was published in 1609. It was printed by Thomas Thorpe TT, and this sonnets was dedicated to WH. Now what is WH? WH is William Herbert, Earl of Pembroke, and William Wriothesley, Earl of Southampton. Central theme of sonnets was love, beauty, time, friendship, and loyalty. Now, addressed to whom? He wrote so many sonnets, but um, किस किसको शेक्सपियर ने एड्रेस्ड किया था इन सोनेट्स को? सो फर्स्ट सोनेट्स 1 to 126 was dedicated to or addressed to fair youth sonnets 127 to 152 were addressed to dark lady sonnets, and sonnets 153 to 154 were addressed to the Greek sonnets or the culprit sonnets. Now, Shakespeare literary life. So, we can divide the Shakespeare's life into four literary periods. So, let's start about the first literary period of William Shakespeare. The first literary period the first literary period which was during 1585 to 1593. During this period, this was the beginning of Shakespearean experiment. It means during that time, during his first literary period, or during the period of 1585 to 1593, he experiments in his writing. As an apprentice, he learned the art of improvising and revising the existing pieces. He revised the three parts of Henry VI and Titunus Andronius. His play Henry VI and Titunus Andronius. These both of these were the plays of William Shakespeare. And during that time, during 1585 to 1593, he just revised his own work. It was during this period that he composed his early comedies. During that time, he composed his comedies like Love Labour Lost, The Two Gentlemen of Verona, Is Midsummer Night Dream, and The Country of Error. So, two main points. The first, during the first literary period, he experiments in his overwriting like Henry I, Antigonus, Antonius, and he wrote so many comedies, like four comedies. Under the influence of Marlowe, he tried to experiment with the historical play Richard III. During the first literary period, he wrote Richard III and he wanted to try some different method, and he was impressed and he was influenced by the Marlowe. Showcasing his versatility, Shakespeare wrote the young tragedy Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet was also written wrote that time. The works composed during this period lacks the typical Shakespearean finesse. The characterization was definitely shallow, and overall, they appear to be extremely immature. Moreover, one can definitely witness regular use of puns, stiff use of black words, and rhyming dialogues in the works, which were composed during this period. So these are some deficiency or negative points of William Shakespeare during his first literary period. And he also include Venus and Adonis and the Rape of Lucy. So these both of these poems were also written during that time. Now the second literary period. Second literary period was during 1594 to 1600. This was a period of council play and great comedies. During that time, he wrote so many plays and so many comedies, like plays like Richard II, The Merchant of Venice, Henry VI, King John, and King Fifth. And the comedies like The Taming of the Shrew, Much Ado About Nothing, As You Like It, Twelfth Night, and The Merry Wives of Windsor. In these works, Shakespeare show his craftsmanship as an original composer. So he during the second period he improved his writing. None of these play have any kind of influence from his preceders. All these works highlighted Shakespeare's command over the power of development technique, and he used different type of techniques in these works. There is an intense and detailed exploration of human motives and passion during this literary period, the works which was written during that period. The use of prose and black verse increased gradually. He composed prose and black verses. He used black verses in his work, discarded the use of rhymes in dialogues, and the stiffness of black verses paves way to more lucid and flexible use of the form. So these some important points and the improvement in his second literary period. Now, Shakespeare's third literary period. Shakespeare's third literary period was during 1601 to 1608. This was a period when Shakespeare composed the best of his tragedies. Most of his best tragedies was published during his third literary period. This was also a phase which witnessed some of his serious comedies, and he also wrote very comedies. This was the most successful phase of Shakespeare as a playwright. So the if question आता है कि which was the most successful phase of Shakespeare as a playwright, so third literary period was the most successful phase of Shakespeare. His competency as a dramatist, his intellectual abilities, as well as the power of expression has restored the literary world with some of the most memorable composition. He wrote so many versatile composition. But more than creative talent, what is most amusing is to see the way the spirit of Shakespearean work changed. During that time, Shakespeare's work changed. He now seemed to be more interested in the darker side of human experience. In during the work which was published in third literary period, he wanted to show the negative side of the human experiences. He was solely focused on challenging the existing social moral order. And by doing so, he managed to show how destructive passion can ruin the lives of both the guilty as well as the innocent together. Most of the plot of Shakespeare's play composed during this period take a deep insight into the power of good and evil, where the power of evil are फाइनली क्वेश्चन अपॉन, यानी कि इस पीरियड्स के अंदर उसने जो पावर ऑफ गुड और पावर ऑफ एवल है इसको उसने समझने की कोशिश करी थी, और पावर ऑफ एवल को उसने क्वेश्चंस करने की कोशिश करी थी ड्यूरिंग हिज थर्ड लिटरेरी पीरियड. And the plays which were composed during this period were composed Julius Caesar, Hamlet, All Well That Ends Well, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, Measure for Measure, Troilus and Cressida, and Coriolanus. Now his third fourth and his last literary period, which was 1609 to 1630. This was the period of later comedies and, as we call it, dramatic romance. During that time he wrote dramatic romance. The shifting period is very obvious during this period. It is almost as if the tremble phase of his life. In this life, this periodic literary period is tremble phase of his life, has now given way to a more beautiful sunny phase of his life. Unlike the previous period, which everything in his fictional world was dark and somber, कि लास्ट पीरियड में उसने अपने फिक्शनल वर्ल्ड को डार्क और सोमर दिखाया था. दिस फेज वाज अ फेज विच बॉट इन हैप्पीनेस एंड होप. सो हैप्पीनेस एंड होप can be seen in the fourth literary period. Even though there is an element of traffic aspect in each of these later play, one can't deny that in this place good always prevails the evil. इस प्ले में हम देख सकते हैं कि गुड हमेशा जीत जाता है. Even the tone and the manner are more tender and optimistic in comparison to the previous. So, the fourth literary period, the works in the fourth literary periods were full of optimistic happiness and hope, and the uh, good always win, the concept of good always win. But needless to say, this is also the period which clearly marks the decline of great playwright. मतलब इसमें क्या हो गया था, शेक्सपियर का डिक्लाइन भी वो होने लग गया था. The construction is definitely unsatisfactory. The character development is careless. The style has no resemblance to the powerful impact that the presiding year of his creative talent had recorded. During that time, he became very old, and that's why his constructions were unsatisfactory. His character development is careless, and the energy which was seen in his presiding literary periods, we couldn't see those goodness or those things in the fourth literary period. So there is a decline in Shakespeare writing. Critics now agree that of the various plays that are credited to Shakespeare during this period, only three of them are solely authored by them: Cymbeline, The Tempest, and the writer's Winter's Tale. So these three plays which were published during the fourth period. Now, and he was definitely co-authored more play, and he wrote so many work with collaborated to someone like Persiles, Henry VIII, and the two noble kingsmen. The Tempest was Shakespeare's last written play. The last written play was The Tempest. So that's all for today. In my next video, I will discuss about the chronology of Shakespeare's play and some other important points of Shakespeare. So that's all for today. Thank you.